Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. With what's currently happening in Russia, or what happened in Russia with this cool, fake, legit, who knows, I wanted to play you a video from 9 months ago. Now, this video from 9 months ago was Alex Karp speaking. This is when everybody thought that he was absolutely batshit crazy. He was speaking to CNBC, and I forget the guy's name, that young dude, nice hair, young white dude from CNBC. He always gives us a lot of love. And he was talking about the war in Ukraine and how people are going to start understanding, and countries are going to start understanding, how you have this David and Goliath scenario where certain things work and certain things are just not working anymore. And the certain thing is, if you have grit and you have a will to fight and you are a smaller force, but you have superior technology in terms of software, not hardware as well, but software in this specific case, that makes all the difference. And he says that we are currently seeing it in Ukraine. He reiterates that we were the only ones, Palantir, that actually came to Ukraine when this happened, and we were one of the only ones that thought Ukraine can actually win. And whether you think Ukraine is winning or losing, and I think after what happened right now, Ukraine definitely has the edge because they took back a lot of pieces of land. One thing is for certain: Ukraine is still standing. So all the people that said Ukraine was supposed to fall in 3 days, including Vladimir Putin, it's still here a year and a half later or so. When you're going to hear Dr. Alex Karp speak, I want you to really allow this interview to resonate with you and pay attention to what he says about how Palantir's price action moves. At the time, the Palantir price was like $7 and something cents. And how he says, listen, there's a lot of doubters, but you'll see what ends up happening later. And he says, you'll see what happens later. We've been here before. We know how this works. And at the end of the day, Palantir is going to be a major winner because Palantir is supplying software that actually works on the battlefield, battle ready, battle tested, not in possible it's going to work in the future, but in actuality working right now. And you see the example of what's happening right now in Ukraine. From then, Palantir was named an official partner for the reconstruction of Ukraine, which is estimated to be $400 to $600 billion. On top of that, BlackRock is the official piggy bank for this reconstruction fund. And BlackRock is the third largest holder of shares of Palantir, holding nearly 5% of total shares of Palantir. Please enjoy the rest of this interview. Please listen to this interview. It's only 13 minutes long. And just see what Alex Karp said 9 months ago and compare it to what's happening right now and see if you can make a connection. Many times Alex Karp speaks and only years later you're like, wow, he was actually right. And it seems like everything is coming full circle. We now have our gap profitability. We have a extremely good growth in the United States commercial, which he's going to talk about. But one thing that people are not paying attention to is the immense growth that we're about to have when it comes to military government spending, not just here, but abroad. NATO is going to line up for contracts with Palantir, as they already are. You could hear Lewis Mosley. He was speaking the other day. He's in charge of Palantir UK, Palantir Europe. And he says that now NATO is interested in Palantir software. Also, when this reconstruction happens, Palantir is going to get a nice amount of money from all of this software to help rebuild Ukraine. Also, UK and other countries outside of NATO are also going to be lining up, obviously allies, to be using software from Palantir because it's showing how strong a country like Ukraine can be, not just from Palantir, but with Palantir software, that everybody didn't even give them a shot. And look, especially with what's currently happening right now, they have the biggest chance of winning right now than they ever had. That's what I'm thinking is happening right now. Let's see what ends up happening. Tell me down below what you think is going to happen to the price of Palantir. And if you guys want to support me, I have channel membership down below. Channel membership is $3 a month. I share all my options plays and all of my new plays. For example, I shared my play on cryptocurrency, and everybody's making money, whoever followed that play, and other plays. $3 a month. You support my dream of being a YouTuber. Thank you very, very much. If you don't want to pay $3 a month, all good. No joke. All jokes aside, just support me on Twitter. I have a link to my Twitter down below. Thank you. Have a great day.
Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. Russian President Vladimir Putin raising the stakes in its war with Ukraine. Putin says he's not bluffing when he says he's going to use all means to defend Russia, including potentially using nuclear weapons. Joining us right now to talk about this and Putin's nuclear threat is Alex Karp, CEO and co-founder of Palantir. And the last time we saw you in Aspen and prior to that in Davos, in some ways you called this in terms of this potential threat. So where are we really at this point?
Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you then and a pleasure to talk to both of you now. When we were talking about the reality that nuclear weapons are on the table 3 and 2 months ago, of course, that was derided. The general belief I had just comes from building a software business and seeing software in action in war, where software plus heroism can really slay the giant. And I know the Russians just underestimated the power of kinetic plus software plus heroism. And then I believe it's a zero-sum game in Russia, and there is no ability for Putin to lose. He can't just fail at war and then retire, which is what we're used to in democracy. Politicians fail, and then we have another politician. And so the reason why I was sounding the alarm at Davos, and then again when we talked to much derision, was simply this combination of American software, the way we build software, plus a kind of heroism that is very unusual, would outperform the giant of spend. And that leads to just this jarring reaction. And we don't want to believe in the West that people would be zero-sum. We're not that zero-sum in the West.
So basically, he's been backed into a corner. He's a caged animal. He will do crazy things that we
You're
can't.
backed into a corner where the corner is, if you fail, you'll be killed. Your friends will be killed. Your family will lose their assets.
So how do you then handicap what his options are?
Well,
and what the real possibility of him using nuclear weapons?
What I believe we should do is continue to support Ukraine and begin to engage in a dialogue where we figure out what it looks like for him to fail without having to say at home he failed. Now,
so what does that look like to you?
Well, Ukrainians have to decide. I know, having gone there, that they very much believe that their territory should be respected. I think we in the West should stick by the line that every country should be able to have its own sovereignty over its territory. I don't know, but I do know the things that we discussed and predicted that Ukraine would massively outperform have happened. The danger scenario of massive outperformance is that your adversary is backed into a corner, whether that's...
But if he's failing and we need to find a way for him to look like he hasn't failed to his own people, what is that?
Well, we're very good at that in the U.S. We're failing at a lot of stuff, and we convince ourselves we're not. I mean, I happen to be more on the left. Some people are more on the right. The job of a politician is to convince you haven't failed, and then get your vote.
You sound like Henry Kissinger, though.
So,
basically, we're going to have to give something away. But it's
Henry, I discussed this with him. He believes that my belief is the Ukrainians decide, but you need someone who's not me. Like, I'm not adept. My job is to actually deliver something that works and win. There are people whose whole professions are to help you explain to your people why it wasn't a failure. I don't do that for a living, but I do know that somebody who does that for a living needs to be very engaged right now, because if you've won something against all odds, whether it's less importantly, a tech company, or you've defended I don't actually believe most people in the West, in America and England, really believed Ukraine could win. And in fact, I know they didn't believe this because through our clients, hear what the assessments were. But if you've won against all odds, you've cost your family members have died. There's no way you're going to compromise unless it's on your terms.
That's why I think it's gotten so much more complicated.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have to roll in people who are specialized at that. And people who are specialized at are called politicians. That's what they do for a living. And they need to sit down and figure out how do you explain to the Russian people that although you failed, it's not a failure. And there is a way to do that. But first you have to begin. And the beginning part is, look, if you've won something in a negotiation against all odds, both parties have to accept you've won.
Well, first of all, let's just talk about that, which is some people would argue Ukraine has not won yet, and that we're going to have a very difficult winter, right? That things may sort of calm down or at least temporarily slow down because of the weather, and then we have to see what happens in the spring.
I'm not. Winning isn't won till you've won, obviously, but you have a perception based on expectations. If I go out onto a football court and am like a halfway surviving linebacker, I've won. And like this, nobody, when we talked at Davos and you asked me what I thought would happen, it looked like, oh, there goes batshit crazy Karp again with some crazy prognostication that will never happen. Ukraine could win and it could be dangerous because they're going to win. That looked batshit crazy. In fact, that is the reality we're in. And you have to begin with the facts. The facts are they massively outperformed. By the way, this is going to change the way war is fought. Because here you have a tiny country with very little assets, and in the use of software and heroism, you can push off and win against a Goliath.
You keep saying use of software. Explain that.
Well,
this is the Palantir part of the story.
Yeah, the part that we're not allowed to talk about is you just, in classic warfare, it just comes down to post-World War II. America spends $800 billion, Russia spends, I don't know, $65 billion, but Russia thinks half of it is at waste, and they're willing to do things on the human rights front we would never do. So they think it's parity, right? However, when you use information technology, who's moving, what's moving, under what conditions, can you identify people from space? How can you unmask people who are trying to mask themselves? What is the action of the battlefield? Where do you put your assets? Where are their most phased assets? This plays in, by the way, into the American strategy of warfighting, which is quick attack. But you have to know where to attack. How do you deceive your adversary? You know, America has been fighting wars, most of which I've been against for 20, 30 years. We've learned a lot about how to fight wars. The thing is that, and so we have this great knowledge of what it means. And part of that is something that is interestingly very cheap to produce, but it really is best produced in the West. Why is software best produced in the West? Would you want to run a software company in Russia or China and get it? Well, you lose it. So
you just mentioned China. Is there a lesson that you think the Chinese are learning about war and about, to the extent that they're thinking about the future of Taiwan and how that may relate to what's happening in Ukraine?
Every country in the world, including China, and they're like, we should never underestimate our adversaries. These are some of the most interesting, formidable, and creative, intelligent, wise cultures in the world. And they are very much, again, looking at what their expectation was and what was reality. The expectation was probably this last month, maximal, and reality. And then they're, I'm sure, looking at, we're spending gazillions, they're spending a lot less. What is special about what they're doing that's allowing them to massively outperform? And again, in a much less relevant context, why is tech dominated by America? It's like, well, there are all these reasons you have to understand. And with 100% certainty, every country in the world that is big is saying, holy shit, we thought we could just win because we're big. If the people are willing to fight to die, and if they have very specialized, not very costly software and other products and kinetic weapons, tanks, but not really the big ones, they can outperform us and grind us into the dust. And that changes the way the world actually works today.
But here's a software question. How do you think about the Chinese in terms of their talents, abilities?
Well, this is, again, we tend to think we are at a massive disadvantage in the West because we won't violate human rights. But actually, we have a massive advantage.
And just explain that. The argument is because we won't violate human rights and because of civil liberties, we don't have access to the same kind of data stream.
Well, for example, we would not support something that tracks everyone walking by here and tells us what they're doing during their lunch hour when they say they're at work.
Right.
We just don't. I don't support that. I don't think anyone here supports it. You have debate, but it's actually on international standards in a very narrow spectrum. Some people are in favor of knowing that if someone's a terrorist, you get in debates who's a terrorist, who's not. But no one supports broad surveillance of the Chinese nationalist kind that is supported, by the way, by wide swaths of the world. Most people look at it as a disadvantage. I'll tell you that's an advantage. Why? Because we focused all our efforts for the one area that actually matters, fighting wars. And by the way, if you're going to build software for that, you need the best of the best of the best of the best. Those people don't want to build companies in countries where you could lose your company. They don't want to build, by and large, it's certainly at my company, we don't want to build technologies that stop us from having a normal social life, including a normal social life means things we're not actually wanting to discuss in public.
Alex, if all of this gives us such an advantage, why have we seen such a hit to so many software companies? I think you guys are down 58% this year in your stock price.
Well, you know, look, bad times are incredibly good for Palantir because you sort out, you get the durable. There's this thing where you've been involved in these things for a long years, like Palantir's 20 years old, 18 years old. The bad times really uncover the durable companies. And tech is going through bad times. And there are lots of reasons, interest rates, other reasons. But you will see that the durable companies that come out of this in 3, 4 years, 2 years, however long it takes, are largely going to be from America, largely from the West Coast, and they're going to be very focused on producing things that actually matter. Will this like deadly tidal wave wipe out some companies? Yes, it will. And
what are you seeing when we were talking about employment and labor in terms of your employment and being able to hire talent? What are you seeing right now?
Look, bad times.
How easy or hard it is. Plus, by the way, I imagine there are a lot of employees sitting looking at the stock price saying I'm underwater or I have half of what I thought I had.
Well, look, we built Palantir. We were private for almost 16 years, and our share price on the non-private market was going down. So, like, these times, in the end, bad times help us also because the alternatives end up being like our main competition is I want to be a cockroachholder.com who recruits our people. That's our actual competition. A startup that is 2 days away from failing, but engineers don't know it. Those companies aren't getting funding. And so, like, instead of going to mycockroachtrap.com, people are like, yeah, the stock is down, we're doing crazy important things, and the alternatives suck.
Do you see, in terms of clients, though, right now, spending, I mean, on the corporate side and even on the government side, given what's happening in the economy?
We see a big difference between U.S. and, to be frank, probably too frank, the U.S. is just completely different than everywhere else. Our U.S. business has grown 67% a year the last 3 years, from 233 million to just over $1 billion. The rest of the world, people react. Americans, for all of our foibles, we react to bad times by rolling up our sleeves and adapting. The rest of the world has trouble with adapting at the pace we adapt. So yes, our business is being negatively afflicted by the inability to in other countries to adapt the way we adapt in America. On the other hand, we're an 18-year-old business. The last 3 years, the American segment is growing 67%, despite me as a front man. So it's like, maybe if we have a more successful front man, we can even, I'm not planning to go anywhere, but it's like we're despite or because of our various disabilities, we're growing 67% a year in the most important, most interesting market in the world. And yes, we are not growing that way in Germany and France and other places. And I don't expect to grow that way. I do think there'll be a handoff. What I think is going to happen is we're going to have a couple years of terrible times. Those companies that are most robust will survive and thrive. You'll get credit for it in a couple of years, and the rest of the world will do what it often does. It'll follow what we did well while deriding us for how crazy it is in America.
Do you see a recession coming around the globe? Do you see a recession coming here?
I don't know. It's very hard at all. A lot of that's definitional, but what I do see is that people are scared shitless about energy outside of America. They're so scared about the macro political conditions that no one wants to talk about them. Their enterprises are built for a static, unified world of peace. And the balance sheets obviously are not often prepared for what's going to happen, which I think is going to be pretty bad the next couple of years, politically, economically. And then also, that's actually the real problem you have in tech. If you've been raised in an orgiastic environment where you go from high grades in high school to high grades in college to being a billionaire, you've never seen bad times. The worst time you've seen is you can't get a date in high school. That's your bad times.
Alex Karp, never one to hold back. So glad we're on cable rather than broadcast this morning.
Yeah.
We appreciate you being here.
I appreciate being
here. Always being candid with us,
Thanks,
and it's something. So we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Take care.
Because you don't need you can hang out.
Oh.
You don't need to get off.
We're
the
going to
set
break.
just
I'm used to getting thrown out as soon as
It's all good.
as soon as the time to go.